we return once again to Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along the right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect me and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessing. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. Throughout the study of this psalm, continuous emphasis has been put upon the care exercised by the attentive shepherd. It has been stressed how essential to the welfare of the sheep are the rancher's diligent effort and labor. All the benefits enjoyed by a flock under skilled and loving management have been drawn. Now, all of this is summed up here by the psalmist in one brave, simple statement. Surely goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life. The sheep with such a shepherd knows that his is a privileged position. No matter what comes, at least he can be perfectly sure that goodness and love will be in the picture. He reassures himself that he is always under sound, sympathetic, intelligent ownership. What more could he care about? Goodness and love will be the treatment that he receives from his master's expert, loving hands. Not only is this a bold statement, but it's somewhat of a boast, an exclamation of implicit confidence in the one who controls his career and destiny. How many Christians actually feel this way about Christ? How many of us are truly convinced that no matter what occurs in our lives, we are being pursued by goodness and by love? Of course, it is very simple to speak this way when all things are going well. If our health is excellent and our income is flourishing, our families are well, and our friends are fond of us, it's not hard to say, surely goodness and mercy, or love, shall follow me all the days of my life. But what about when one's body breaks down? What does one say when standing by, helplessly watching a life partner die by degrees under appalling pain? What is our reaction when our job folds up and there's no money to meet the bills? What happens if our children can't make their grades in school or get caught running with the wrong gang? What do we say when suddenly, without good grounds, friends prove false and turn against us? These are the sorts of times that test a person's confidence in the care of the shepherd. These are the occasions during which the chips are down and life is more than a list of pious platitudes. When our little world is falling apart and the dream castles of our ambitions and hopes crumble into ruins, can we honestly declare, surely, yes, surely, goodness and love shall pursue me all the days of my life? Or is this sheer humbug and a maddening mockery? There are events which at the time seem like utter calamities. There are paths down which he leads us that do appear like blind alleys. There are days that he takes us through which are as black as night itself, but all in the end turns out for our well-being. With our limited understanding as a finite human being, we cannot comprehend his management executed in his infinite wisdom. With our natural tendencies to fear, worry, and to ask why, it is not always simple to assume that he really does know what he is doing with us. There are times that we are tempted to panic, to bolt, and to leave his care. Somehow we get the strange, even stupid notion we can survive better on our own. Most men and women have felt this at some time during their lives. But despite this perverse behavior, we should be so glad he doesn't give up on us. We should be grateful he did follow us in goodness and love. The only possible motivation was his own love, his care and concern for us as one of his sheep. And despite our doubts, despite our misgivings about his management of our affairs, he has picked us up in great tenderness. Realize that the one who is truly in Christ's care, no difficulty can arise, no dilemma emerge, no seeming disaster descend on the life without eventual good coming out of the chaos, even if we can't imagine what that might be. This is to see the goodness and the love of our Master in our life. It is the foundation of our faith and our confidence in him. We love him because he first loved us. His goodness and mercy and compassion to us are new every day, and our assurance is lodged in these aspects of his character. Our trust is in his love for us as his own. Our serenity has as its basis an implicit, unshakable reliance on his ability to do the right thing, the best thing in any given situation. The supreme portrait of our shepherd, continually there, flows out to us his goodness and his love. Even though we do not deserve them, they come continually from their source of supply, his own great heart of love. Here is the essence of all that has gone before in the psalm, all the care, all the work, all the alert watchfulness, all the skill, all the concern, all the self-sacrifice are born of his love for us, the one who loves his sheep, who loves his work, who loves his role as the shepherd. As he said, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for his sheep. We know what real love is because Jesus gave up his life for us. So we also ought to give up our lives for our brothers and sisters. If someone has enough money to live well and sees a brother or sister in need but shows no compassion, how can God's love be in that person? 1 John 3:16 and 17. With all this in view, it is then proper to ask ourselves, is this outflow of goodness and mercy and love for me to stop and stagnate in our lives? Is there no way in which it can pass on through us to benefit others? There is a way, and this aspect is one that eludes many of us. There is a positive, practical aspect in which our life in turn should be one where goodness and love follow in our footsteps for the well-being of others. Just as God's goodness and love flow to us all the days of our life, so goodness and love should follow us, should be left behind us as a legacy to others wherever we go. It is worth reiterating at this point that sheep can, under mismanagement, be the most destructive livestock. In short order, they can ruin and ravage land almost beyond remedy. But in bold contrast, they can, on the other hand, be the most beneficial of all livestock if properly managed. Getting down to the nitty-gritty, their manure is the best balanced of any produced by domesticated stock. When scattered efficiently over the pastures, it proves of enormous benefit to the soil. The sheep's habit of seeking the highest rise of ground on which to rest ensures that the fertility from the rich lowland is redeposited on the less productive higher ground. No other livestock will consume as wide a variety of herbage. Sheep eat all sorts of weeds and other undesirable plants which might otherwise invade a field. For example, they love the buds and tender tips of Canadian thistle, which, if it is not controlled, can quickly become a most noxious weed. In a few years, a flock of well-managed sheep will clean up and restore a piece of ravaged land as no other creature can do. Do you take the challenge of being a flock that can make a difference where you live? That you can bring the best and change some of those things that are bad? In ancient literature, sheep were referred to as those of the golden hoofs, simply because they were regarded and esteemed so highly for their beneficial effect on the land. Can others look at us and see our beneficial effect coming from the church? In Keller's experience as a sheep rancher, he had, in just a few years, seen 2 derelict ranches restored to high productivity and usefulness. More than this, what before appeared as depressing eyesores became beautiful, park-like properties of immense worth. Where previously there had been only poverty and pathetic waste, there now followed flourishing fields and rich abundance. In other words, goodness and love had followed his flocks. They left behind them something worthwhile, productive, beautiful, and beneficial to both themselves and others. Where they had walked, there followed fertility and weed-free land. Where they had lived, there remained beauty and abundance. The question now comes to us, is this true of our lives? Do we leave a blessing and benediction behind us? Sir Alfred Tennyson wrote in one of his great classic poems, "The good men do lives after them." On one occasion, 2 friends spent a few days in Keller's home while passing through to some engagements. They invited him to go along. Several days on the road, one of the men missed his hat. He was sure it had been left in the Keller home. He asked Keller to write his wife to find it and kindly send it on to him. Her reply included, "I have combed the house from top to bottom and can find no trace of the hat. The only thing those men left behind was a great blessing." Is this the way people feel about us? Or do we leave a trail of sadness, of frustration behind rather than gladness? Is our memory in other people's minds entwined with mercy and love? Or would they rather forget that we ever existed? Do we deposit a blessing behind us, or are we a curse to others? Is our life a pleasure to people or a pain? In Isaiah 52:7 we read, "How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of the messenger who brings good news, the good news of peace and salvation, the news that the God of Israel reigns." Sometimes it is profitable to ask ourselves such simple questions as, do I leave behind peace in lives or turmoil? Do I leave behind forgiveness or bitterness? Do I leave behind contentment or conflict? Do I leave behind flowers of joy or frustration? Do I leave behind love or animosity? Some people leave such a sorry mess behind them wherever they go that they prefer to cover their tracks. For the true child of God, the one under the shepherd's care, there should never be any sense of shame or fear in going back to where they had lived or been before, because there they left behind them a legacy of uplift, encouragement, and inspiration to others. In Africa, where Keller spent many years, one of the greatest marks left by any man was that of David Livingstone. No matter where his footsteps took him through the bush and plains of the great continent, there remained the impact of his love. Natives whose language he never bothered to learn, long years after, remembered him as a kindly, tender doctor whose goodness and love had followed him all the days of his life. There remains in Keller's mind recollections of the first stories he heard about Jesus Christ. His life was summed up in the simple but deeply profound statement: he went about doing good. We cannot be Jesus Christ, but we can go about doing good. It was as though this was the loftiest, noblest, most important thing on which he could possibly spend his few short years on earth. His good and kindly acts were commingled with love. Where so often other human beings were rude and harsh and vindictive of one another, his compassion and tenderness was always apparent. Even the most flagrant sinners found forgiveness with him, where at the hands of their fellow men they knew only condemnation, censure, and cruel criticism. And again, we have to ask ourselves, is this my attitude to other people? Do we sit up on our pedestals of self-pride and look with contempt on our contemporaries? Or do we get down and identify ourselves with them in their dilemma and there extend a small measure of the goodness and love given to us by our shepherd? Do we see those who fall short with the compassion of Christ or with a critical eye of condemnation? Are we willing to overlook faults and weaknesses in others and extend forgiveness as God has forgiven us for our failings? The only real practical measure of our appreciation for the goodness and love of God to us is to the extent to which we, in turn, are prepared to show goodness and love to others. If we are unable to forgive and extend friendship to fallen men and women, then it is quite certain we know little or nothing in a practical sense of Christ's forgiveness and mercy for us. It is this lack of love among Christians which today makes the church a boring, lukewarm institution. People come to find affection and are turned off by our tepidity. That's Keller's word. Mine is they come to find home and are ignored. But the man or woman who knows firsthand about the goodness and love of God in their own life will be warm and affectionate with goodness and love to others. This is to be a benefit to them, but equally important, it is to be a blessing to God from us. Most of us think that only God can bring a blessing to us. The Christian life is a two-way proposition. Nothing pleased Keller more than to see his flocks flourish and prosper. It delighted him personally to feel compensated for the care he had given to them. To see them content was wonderful in his eyes. To see the land benefiting was beautiful, and the two together made him a happy man. It enriched his own life. It was a reward for his efforts and energy. In this experience, he received full compensation for all that he had poured into the endeavor. Most of us forget that our shepherd is looking for some satisfaction as well. We are told that he looked upon the travail of his soul and was satisfied. This is the benefit that we can bring to him. He looks on our life in tenderness, and he loves us deeply. He sees the long years during which his goodness and love have pursued us without stopping. He longs to see that some measure of that same goodness and love not only passed on to others by us, but also passed back to him with joy. He longs for love, our love, and when we love him, then he is satisfied.